Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and Thursday is upon us once again. And you know what that means?
No, what does it mean?
It's time for Ask a Herbert Erpaderp.
That's not true at all!
Yes, it is. Okay, so I've got nothing to announce unless I've forgotten it, so let's get to the questions. First, from Discord, which is something you should certainly join if you're rad enough, Smoes said, have you listened to The Who before? If so, what do you think of them? Oh, and did you ever have a Sega Genesis or Mega Drive? I was going to say, of course, who hasn't heard of The Who? They're one of the most famous bands ever. Then I thought, well, I've spent a lot of time around various kinds of rock and roll in my life, but maybe a lot of other people haven't had that kind of exposure and haven't heard them. At least not without knowing it. If you've seen CSI Miami, you've heard The Who. It's kind of hard to imagine people not having heard them. Maybe if you haven't heard them, you should check them out. I don't mind The Who, they're pretty good, though I never really got super into them or anything. I mean, I occasionally put on some of their songs and I wouldn't complain if they were on at a party or something like that, but they're not my favourite. They are really well known for a very good reason, they're just not my favourite. Having said that, I am now listening to a John Entwistle bass solo because why not? Obviously, while I wrote that, not while I'm recording. Otherwise you would probably hear it through my microphone, and I would get a copyright strike on this video. To answer the second question, I'm Australian so I know it as the Sega Mega Drive. Also, people seem to pronounce Sega as Sega here. At any rate, Mega Drive is a much cooler sounding name. I never owned one myself, though we did have a Sega Master System too. I do remember knowing a lot of people that did have a Mega Drive though. I played rock and roll racing to death on my neighbour's Mega Drive. I'd say I have a lot of great gaming memories on that console, but I'm old and crap and can't remember anything. Jihad Teppo said, favourite modern tank? I don't really know a whole lot about modern tanks to be honest, but I think I'll say Leopard 2, for no reason other than I think it looks more interesting than say an Abrams or a Challenger 2. Max W said, have you ever thought about trying a model collect kit? Until this point, no, having not heard of them until now. I went and looked at their site and they had a lot of E100s. It seems like they do a lot of 1/72nd scale stuff and a lot of it looks really interesting, including an E100 with a V1 flying bomb launcher. I'm really tempted to get that. So I guess you could say that I have thought about trying a model collect kit. My question is, do you have any experience with their kits? What's the quality like? Burner581 said, have you ever heard of Dystopian Wars? If so, what do you think about it? I have. In fact, I have a bunch of the models around here somewhere. I never did play the game though. I just didn't know anybody who was really interested in playing it. But I thought the models looked cool, so I bought a bunch of Prussian Empire stuff. There's not really much assembly to those models, and that's why there haven't really been any videos about them, but maybe I should start painting something. I forget what the giant robot the Prussian Empire have was called, but maybe I'll paint that. It's pretty cool and an interesting model in its own right. I think that's a pretty cool idea, and it's on the list now. It won't be happening right away, but eventually. Ivan Zaitev, probably not how you pronounce it, said, you have mentioned that you are not an anime fan, but have you watched Girls und Panzer? They had a pink M3 Lee. I have in fact watched Girls und Panzer, and I did quite enjoy it. The concept is quite absurd and I was entertained by that, though I don't think I would have enjoyed it quite as much if it wasn't about tanks. I just don't get the schoolgirl obsession that seems prevalent in anime. Harry Robinson said, I am planning to invest in some Vallejo model paints, but I'm not sure which ones to get. Can you make a list of the basic colours that I would need? Example, Dunkelgelb, London Grey, etc. I guess it really depends on what you're intending to paint. If you're just looking for basic colours, there are sets that you can get that include a good variety of basic colours. I think one of them is called Wargaming Basics or something like that. They'll have colours like red, blue, green, yellow, black, white, basic colours. Personally, I use a lot of Russian green, having painted a lot of Russian stuff. If you're planning on painting German stuff, you probably won't need very much Russian green, but you will want some Dunkelgelb, or you might prefer Middlestone. Also, you'll want a red-brown. There's a Model Air German red-brown, but maybe you could use black red or tank brown or even chocolate. Also, you'll probably want reflective green, though there's also a bunch of different greens you could use for that too. It's definitely worth doing some research to figure out which colours you like, specifically for main camo colours. There's a lot of options there within the Vallejo ranges. That's probably not overly helpful, is it? Because I mostly paint tanks, the basics I might want are probably going to be different to someone who mostly does ships or figures. Either way, the paints I use most are black grey or Model Air German grey. They're very similar to each other. Also London grey, mahogany, beige brown, buff, which I mostly use for making other colours lighter, and while they're not Vallejo, Army Painter dark tone, strong tone and soft tone are really good to have, and I would recommend them to anyone. I don't think there are really a lot of essential colours, and the main thing to consider when buying paints is what you plan to paint, and when you have a basic set of colours you can pretty much mix up any colour you want. It just takes a little bit of work. It's also worth noting that Vallejo Model Air and Model Colour can be a bit different from each other even if the colour is called the same thing. I think I'm rambling now, hopefully that's been somewhat helpful. Smoes said, "Have you played Star Trek Online?" I have, very briefly when it was still pretty new. I used to play a lot of EVE Online when it came out, and there was all this talk that Star Trek Online would take EVE's player base, and I think a lot of people tried it out, but it never really hooked me. It just didn't feel like the same Star Trek universe that I love, and the couple of quests I tried weren't especially fun and didn't feel all that rewarding. I think I was annoyed that I had to do ground missions and couldn't just jump into space combat, though that memory might be incorrect. I'm old and crap, so I misremember things from time to time. Top Bunk Productions said, "Have you ever heard of or watched Red Dwarf? I'm watching it from the beginning on Netflix. It's an absolute classic of space comedy." I have. I remember my mum watching it when I was very young, and I guess I just didn't get the humour until I was much older. At some point it clicked and I ended up really enjoying it, though I don't think I've seen every single episode. Maybe I should catch up on it. A friend and I were actually talking about Red Dwarf the other day, or rather we were laughing at the Americans and their attempt to make their own version. Fun fact, the second failed pilot had Terry Farrell from Deep Space Nine as the cat. The original version is of course the only version that you need. Also, the American one was never broadcast. What I'm trying to say is if you've not seen Red Dwarf, definitely check it out. On last week's Ask a Herbert Erpaderp, Shulluff said, "I hereby declare this week to be Jeopardy week. Answer a Herbert Erpaderp," where we give the answers like, "I don't think so, but a KV-2 could crush them," or "Maybe sending more dissidents to the Gulag will help." Well, it seems that one didn't really work out, and I'm kind of glad it didn't. It would be a little bit confusing, though it would probably be pretty funny. If anybody wants to play that game in the comments section, I won't not answer, or ask, I guess. Go ahead is what I'm trying to say. Gumias Briada said, "Are you sometimes afraid of other people, what they may think about you building models?" Afraid? No, not at all. But also, I don't run around shoving it in everyone's face, because, well, that's just obnoxious. I am sure there are people who judge me negatively for building models. In fact, I have been told on multiple occasions things like, "That's for kids," or "Real men don't do that," or even stupid things like, "Yeah, nah, that'll get you a job, eh?" Does it matter what these people think? Nope. In fact, I do a fair bit of my own judgment on them in return. I usually get the impression that they're really boring people because all they do is work, worry about what real men do, and focus on being perceived as an adult, and their time is so worthless that they can waste it being concerned with what I do with my time. And I doubt they really care what I think. I don't care what they think. People think a lot of things, and I'm really not concerned about what they think unless it directly impacts me in some way, and it very rarely does. When I was younger, I would have been much more likely to hide my hobbies, especially from girls, but at some point I figured that doing so is just going to lead to unhappiness, and I learned to embrace my nerdiness and model buildingness. Model buildingness is a word now. I'm pretty sure most women like guys that have their own interests and hobbies, so there's always that. Wujek Stalin, I believe that said, "In the next video, you have to sing the Soviet national anthem. Otherwise, you'll be sent to the Gulag by my secret KGB forces and will suffer from endless butt pain. I hope this will convince you enough. Sorry for my poor English. Signed, Joseph Stalin. Soyuz ne Russia. Wait a minute. You aren't Stalin. You can't trick me. I don't need to do any singing. You can't send me to the Gulag. I'll send you to the Gulag. Chud Chudsley said, "What kind of people annoy you the most?" Lots of people do things that I find annoying, but it's like getting angry. If I let them annoy me, they win, and it's mostly something in my control. That said, I find quite a few things annoying. There are of course the obvious things, or what I would think to be the obvious things like racism and sexism. They're pretty annoying. Also, people that state their opinion as fact and won't even consider that what it is they're talking about is subjective, and will never consider the opinions of others. The kind of people who could never even imagine that they might be wrong. Very similarly, people who can't express their view without saying people who disagree are stupid or whatever names they choose to use. If your argument begins with, "You're an idiot, you're doing blah blah blah," I'll tune out before you finish. People who think everything is a zero-sum game, where one person's gain is another's loss. That's bullshit and it's annoying. People who take things like video games and movies and stuff a bit too seriously and will actually let themselves get angry about them. Also, somewhat related to that, gatekeepers. People who don't value your time, but for some reason feel entitled to it. People with no self-awareness who blame everyone else for their problems, like nice guys, red pillers and incels. They're pretty annoying, though I very rarely encounter those in real life. I think I'm getting a little bit ranty. I could come up with a really long list of annoying things and people, but I'm not sure it's really worth the time. And none stand out as the definite most annoying kind of person. Being annoyed is like being angry. I guess it's really just a milder form. You let things get you annoyed. You don't have to. Mr. Elite Zealot said, "What type of glue do you use?" At the moment, for plastic, I use Tamiya Extra Thin Cement, which I have discovered I really like. I previously used Revell Contactor Professional, which I also liked. I'm finding the brush applicator of the Tamiya glue to be more usable than the metal tip applicator the Revell glue has. For resin and metal, I just use whichever superglue is cheap at the supermarket, as long as it has a brush. At the moment, I have Selly's Quick Fix. It's a superglue. It does superglue things. And that's it for the questions this week. Let's go and have a look at what's been shared over on the Miniatures channel on Discord. First, Jihad Tepo shared this Panther D. The D. This is a Zvezda 1/35th scale model with a partial interior. The smoke launchers for the right side were lost. They were replaced with some wire to make it look as though they'd been ripped off. I always like seeing creative ways people deal with missing parts. This is a really great model. Sneaky Zaku shared this Apocalypse Pony. This is a Warhammer model, a lord on a demonic mount. Where's the lord, you say? Well, here he is, lording it up and such. This is some very nice work. Ducking Tanker is making use of the snow in England. Even snowflakes are bigger in the grim dark future. That snow does look refreshingly cold, and I'm a tiny bit jealous. Harry Robinson shared this Airfix Grant he recently painted. He says, "Don't get it, it's an awful kit," though he is happy with the result. I am willing to believe you. I have very low expectations of Airfix kits. You've made it look pretty good though. Harry also shared some micro armor. Look at these tiny little things. There's 3 Sharby 1s, a Chieftain, a Panzer III, a Stug, and an A7V. That's quite a variety of itty-bitty tanks you've got there. There's also this Mastiff AFV, seen here with the Chieftain. James Valentine shared this work-in-progress field-converted Panther. This is interesting, and I can't wait to see the finished result. Punky Ryan posted a similar work-in-progress. This is a late war Pack 40 on Panzer II field modification. The base kit was a Tamiya Panzer II. I really like this. It really looks convincingly like an improvised field modification, and I can't wait to see this one painted up too. Also, here is a wooden box for some of the shells. It's good to not have them rolling around loose. Burner581 shared this work-in-progress Blood Angel Captain. He said he thinks he's going overboard with the amount of colours and asks what we think. Personally, I agree with whoever said that all the extra colours would be appropriate for a captain, and I think it looks good. Really though, the only person you need to ask is yourself. If you're satisfied with all the colours, that's good. If not, you can always change it. And last but certainly not least, Top Bunk Productions has shared some of his older models, all of which are based on the 1/72nd scale Plastic Soldier Company Panzer 38T and Variants kit. Some of these models were done quite some time apart, and you can see where Top Bunk Productions has improved his skills. He's also made it so there's some modularity with clever use of leftover bits. Very nice work. As always, I'm feeling pretty motivated and inspired by seeing the work you folks have been sharing on Discord, and I hope you're also inspired to get building and painting. And if you are, maybe share some progress with us on Discord. That'd be cool. And with that, this week's Ask a Herbert Erpaderp shall now draw to a close. If you have any questions or comments you would like me to respond to next week, be sure to leave them in the comments section below or on Discord. The choice is yours. And of course, if you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe to me here on YouTube, follow me on social media, and watch me live stream on Twitch. And if you really like the things I do, please consider helping to support the channel over at Patreon. Links to all of those things are in the description below. As always, I shall return soon, so until then, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.